So Tamie, it is so lovely to speak to you, to see you. Tell us where you are. Where am I talking to you from?
I'm in the northern suburbs of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania at the moment, which is in East Africa.
It is. That's wonderful. So how did you come to be there? Tell us how you ended up in Dar es Salaam, because I'm judging from your look and your accent, that's not where you were born.
No, I'm an Aussie. I was born in Sydney and lived in Sydney until I was 11, and then my family moved to Adelaide, and with apologies to your Sydney listeners, decided we had come to the promised land and we're never going back.
Wow. Adelaide.
We can get into that another time maybe. And I had always kind of, so my dad was in ministry, right? My dad was a Sydney Anglican minister. And so I grew up around people who are in ministry and missionaries. So, you know, when you grow up, you want to be a fireman or a policeman or a teacher or a missionary or a church pastor. Those were kind of the options that were around in my childhood.
Wow.
And so I was always kind of around that. My parents dragged us along to CMS events. And so it was kind of always
what's CMS? Just what's CMS for those who
Yes,
who
Church
don't know?
Missionary Society, which is
Okay.
the kind of mission organisation in Australia. Started in the UK. The guys who stopped slavery in the UK also formed CMS. So that's kind of a
Awesome.
very small pot of history.
Great pedigree there. Okay, that's good. Missionaries can do some good things. Is that what you're trying to say?
So I had no intention of ever going to Africa because I studied post-colonial studies at uni. And as far as I was concerned, I was not touching Africa with a barge pole. White people in Africa was a disaster and I didn't want to participate in it.
Yep. Fantastic. Okay, so God in many of our lives has a sense of humor, doesn't he? He goes, this is what you don't want to do. Now let me show you that is in fact what you're going to do. So how did that happen?
Well, so I knew that I wanted to do some kind of overseas stuff. I met Arthur, who wasn't sure what he wanted to do with his life. So I didn't tell him what I wanted to do with my life because I didn't want someone kind of following around after me.
Right.
So I didn't really tell him what I wanted to do. I mean, I'm sure he had some inkling, but he decided that he wanted to do kind of like university ministry. Our AFES group had been very influential for both of us. That was where we met. And so we decided, and he wanted to do that, and he was happy to do it anywhere in the world. And I love student ministry as well, and so it kind of melded together that I wanted to go overseas and he was happy to do student ministry and you could do that anyway. So we thought we're going to do student ministry overseas. We both had a bit of German language background. Arthur was very into apologetics, and so we thought we'll go like Eastern Europe, kind of that kind of area. So that was what we were planning to do. We were talking to CMS about that. And then we moved to Melbourne, which was just, I mean, Melbourne's got a lot of things going for it, but it does not have great weather. And we both we'd come from Adelaide with the big sky, and it's, Adelaide's basically in drought all the time. So it's just sunny all the time. And we came to Melbourne, there was so much cloud, it was dark, and the winter went on forever, and we both got quite sick. We both got kind of different manifestations of seasonal affective disorder. And we just started thinking, we think we might be too soft for Europe.
That's right. Because if you can't cope with Melbourne, coping with Northern European,
So we started thinking, well, we'd better go somewhere where the sun shines. And at the same kind of time, a missionary from Tanzania came to our theological college where we were studying, and he said, I'm here to recruit student workers for Tanzania. Now, we knew we wanted to do student work, but we did not want to go to Africa. But this guy was like an old friend of my parents, and so I thought, you better go along to his session and, encourage the visiting missionary. So I went along. And, of course, the great irony of this is now I am a visiting missionary who goes to these kind of things. But went along, and basically what he was describing was just a really great fit for what we could do. And so I went back up to our apartment and said to Arthur, oh, my goodness, I think we have to go to Tanzania.
Right.
And that was kind of how it started. And we, because of course the sun shines in Tanzania. That was a place that we could go to, but we were very hesitant, like I say, to really kind of wade into that post-colonial area. And so we did like a reconnaissance trip to Tanzania to work out, well, is this just some white guy who wants other white guys to come and join him, or is this like a genuine invitation from Tanzanians? And we were satisfied enough that it was genuine. But the great thing about CMS is that they don't send you to do a particular role straight away. They send you and they say, for your first 3 years, listen, learn the language, learn the culture, and then work out the lay of the land, and then work out how you can be helpful rather than coming in with preconceived expectations. So actually we ended up doing something quite different from what that missionary invited us to. But that was kind of how it all played out and worked out. Yeah.
So were you always, you've always been a follower of Jesus your whole life? There's never been a moment where you weren't, you just grew up and that was it for you?
So like I say, my parents were in ministry. They're church planters in the western suburbs of Sydney at Bosley Park. So when I say church planting, like there was a block of land that the Anglican diocese said to my dad, go plant a church on this land. Right. All we have is the land.
Awesome.
So I was 5, I think, and I remember the big demountable building coming in on the back of the truck and being plopped down on this bit of land. Yep. And our family lived behind it in the rectory. Yeah. And my dad was the church planter. My mum is the real energy and spirit and guts behind it. And she always spoke to us as if it was like this amazing, exciting thing that we got to do, that, Dad's going to be the minister and I get to work with women and you guys get to come and church plant with us. And we were like, I'm one of 4 girls, and we were like, yeah, that sounds great, Mum. And my early experiences of church were incredibly positive.
Wow.
But both of my parents really nurtured that faith in us. So my father nurtured it by really wanting us to think for ourselves. So when I was in grade 4, I went to school one time. We were doing current affairs, looking at stuff that was in the newspaper, and there was something about women's ordination in Sydney. It was a big issue at the time, and I put my hand straight up and I said, it is outrageous that people would not think women could be ordained, because Galatians 3 says there's neither male nor female, and that's the end of the story. So I came home and we're sitting around the dinner table talking you would not believe what someone said at school today. And my father, Sydney Anglican minister, right? So he's like, well, I don't know that women should be ordained. And I'm like, wow. Who are you? And he says to me, well, Tam, let's talk about this. He gets out the Bible. We look at these Bible passages, and he doesn't tell me what to think. He says, here are the Bible passages. Go away and have a look at them. Come back to me and we'll discuss them. I'm 8, right? Wow. But my father always treated me as someone who was, who had the same Holy Spirit that he had, who could read the Bible and understand the Bible and could talk about things. And I asked him recently about it, and he said, well, my goal was never to kind of teach you what to think. I always wanted to teach you to think for yourself, so that whenever you kind of encountered problems in your faith, you actually had the resources to think about it. And my mum was very similar. So when I was about, 11 or 12, I came to her and I said, or maybe I was a bit younger, maybe 10 or 11, I came to her and I said, listen, Mum, I've been thinking that maybe I'm a Christian just because you and Dad are a Christian. If I'd been born into a Muslim family, I'd been a Muslim. If I was born into a Buddhist family, maybe a Buddhist. And am I just a Christian because I'm a product of my kind of environment?
Yeah, wow.
It's a pretty scary question for a 2-year-old child to ask.
It's a profound, one of the great questions Monotheism of faith, yeah.
Yeah, and my mum like doesn't panic at all. She's just like, yeah, it's a great question. Well, I mean, I guess probably what you want to think about is go and have a look at those other faiths and see if you think they really offer the
Wow.
same as what Christianity offers. So I'm like, oh, okay. So, I go and like get our Encyclopedia Britannica to read about those other faiths. I kind of come back to it a bit later on. I'm like, I've been really thinking about this one that I'm not sure that anyone else any other religion really is able to deal with sin. And I think it's only in Jesus that there's really a solution to that. And she's like, oh, okay, so that's kind of what you're thinking now. That's great, Dan. And they were just very good at kind of supporting any questions that I had and treating them as real. And then I think not pressuring me to be a Christian, but just saying, you got to own this for yourself. So, yeah, ask those questions, find those answers. And so really my experience as a child was, I think of having all those things put into place. And so when I came into my kind of teenage and young adult years, I really encountered a world which was much more much more difficult to exist in, particularly as a woman. And that brought around big questions about, and I guess a church that was difficult to exist in as a woman. Because, my
Can you tell me a little more about what was difficult specifically as a woman?
So my dad might not have thought that women could be ordained, but he was like awesome at supporting me and seeing me grow. And so those things never really kind of came into conflict for me. But later on, we were in Adelaide. So this is after we'd moved from Sydney. And Adelaide is, I guess, more at a kind of institutional level, more open to women's ministry.
Right.
But I encountered just, really just sexism towards women that I had not encountered in my family. We were in a church that had a youth pastor or a youth leader who was abusing women and who had or girls in the youth and kind of had a reputation for that. And everyone was just like, oh, well, that's how he is.
Wow.
So, this kind of acceptance of just really terrible treatment of women.
Yeah.
But I think in some ways the kind of foundation that my parents had given me of questioning these things and asking, well, what does the Bible say about this? Meant that I didn't look at that and go, that's it, I have to get rid of Christianity. I could look at it and say, this is wrong, and Christianity has the resources here to combat this and to say this is not God's heart. Huh. And that was an ongoing kind of experiment for me, particularly as I went to university and kind of I started doing, feminist literature and post-colonial literature and all this kind of stuff that kind of deconstructs a stack of things.
Yep.
And it was very anti-Christian a lot of the time. And trying to work out, okay, so how do I put this stuff together? Because the university lecturers and whoever are telling me that the church is against women and that I need to be a feminist. And I was like, but could I be both? I'm pretty sure I can be both. I'm pretty sure that Christians can be pro-women from what I read in the Bible. But those weren't necessarily the what I was hearing from the church either. That was kind of this kind of anti-world kind of stance. And so, trying to bring those things together and trying to work out, okay, how do I kind of forge a way here that actually works for how I exist in the world and in the end, for what I think the Bible's saying.
Yeah. I mean, what strikes me is one of the things that's interesting is your father might have been conservative in his theology around women, but actually in practice was a deeply loving, respectful person who treated women very well. So at one level, your espoused theology doesn't necessarily connect with your lived practice, as it were, on either side of the debate, right?
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, I asked him about this recently, and he said, "Oh, man, Tam, I wasn't thinking about, how do I make you into a good woman? I was thinking, how do I make you into a Christian who's going to hold on to her faith?"
Wow.
And so that
beautiful.
Was, he wasn't really thinking in those kind of gender ideology terms. And there's a beauty about that kind of gender blindness in a way. that was, very beneficial to me.
Yeah. So was from then on, so has your faith been one, apart from a little blip around feminism and post-colonialism and some, a sexually abusive youth leader and a patriarchal oppressive church in part, the rest of it, has Christianity been plain sailing for you? Has it all been easy? Has it been life, we hear the story, you accept Jesus into your life and he'll make your life better. It'll be fantastic and you'll never have any struggles. Has that been your experience?
I mean, I don't think that's any Christian's experience.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, those things were not blips, really. They were pretty big questions for me.
Yeah.
And, I've always thought of myself as someone who wasn't much of a doubter. I think in some ways because I've had that conviction that sometimes what the church is doing is not what God loves.
Right.
But I think more recently I've started to think of myself as someone who does doubt. And I think partly that's come from living cross-culturally, because when you live cross-culturally, you just realise that all the things that you think are true and not controversial, it turns out are completely new and weird to other people, and they think that you're completely weird. And so that's kind of a deconstructive process as well. And I think,
Can you give us an example of that? Like, is there any one sort of?
Well, okay, so like the Christianity, the kind of tradition that I come from, very much holds very dear this kind of gospel of self-sacrifice, that what I am doing is living my life for Jesus. He needs to become more and I need to become less. And so I'm, and so it's all about sacrifice. It's all about what am I giving up for the kingdom. Yep. Well, here in Tanzania, that is basically a heresy.
Wow.
Because people read it as, they read it against a cultural backdrop of a Christianity that has really tried to keep them poor for a long time. And so they've developed this theology of expansion and how, and that actually what God wants you to do is to become more, not less. And they read, and they absolutely see that in the Bible. So they go to Genesis 1 and they say, God created us to rule over the earth, to expand it, and to become, caretakers of it. Yep. And I'm like, I mean, yes, but, then we have to be humble and all these other things. And they're like, we have to be great. And I'm like, we are just talking at cross purposes here. There's just our fundamental kind of ideas about what is right and good and just in the world. We're coming from two different places. I mean, that's a gross oversimplification of how things work. But that's like a quick example of how we're just at odds with each other. Yeah, or not at odds, but coming from very different places.
So what do you do with that? How do you process that spiritually and personally?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that was very important to me in my own kind of spiritual life happened when I was a ministry trainee in Adelaide, working for half for my church and half for the university ministry in Adelaide. And we had these seminars that we were doing about, general like ministry stuff and how do you sustain yourself in ministry and this kind of thing. And we did one on, I can't remember what it was called, but the guy who came said, when you're in ministry or any Christian service or life, and you are absolutely used up and you feel completely dry and you're in the spiritual wasteland, what do you do? And in terms of talking about smooth sailing, I feel like just a lot of my life has felt like I was in that place. Other people seem to have these incredibly deep, intimate experiences of God, and I'm just like, I don't know, it just doesn't, I've had a
Right.
few of those experiences, but it's just not been my normal, a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of feel a bit inferior as a Christian, I guess, or like you're doing something wrong, or so. And I was very much feeling that way at that moment, feeling like a fraud, that I was kind of in ministry and yet not really experiencing that much intimacy with God. I'm just sitting there like, oh, what a great question. I hope he uses the answer. And everyone's giving kind of their normal, the responses that you've heard a lot of times before. Oh, well, when I feel spiritually dry, I read the Psalms and I pray the Psalms and this kind of thing. I'm like, oh man, like I'm such a bad Bible reader.
Yep.
And I'm just sitting at this table being quiet, which is, that's not my normal modus operandi.
Unlike you.
So I'm just like sitting there, just like, I wonder what he's going to say. And he keeps asking people, keep giving the things that I'm just like, okay. And he says, okay, what about when you can't read the Psalms anymore? What about when that is beyond you? And I'm just like, oh, what a great question. And he says, when you can no longer maintain your spiritual life, what happens? And he says, when you can no longer maintain your spiritual life, the Son who died for you sits at the right hand of the Father and intercedes for you, because none of it depends on you and it all depends on him. And I'm like, I had this just incredible feeling of relief. It was like, just like water rushing through my muscles and just releasing them. And I just thought, oh my word, that is right. That it does all depend on him, and he's the one who holds his sheep close.
Yeah.
And when I have nothing, he's still enough, and he's the one who's holding on to me, not me holding on to him. And so that was very precious to me and continues to be very precious to me. And I think being here and feeling like things are all kind of, you feel kind of deconstructed, and not just theologically, you feel deconstructed in a lot of different ways. We wear different clothes, our children are growing up in this kind of like between world. They have no idea which culture they come from. All these different ways that you're kind of deconstructed, and just thinking, Jesus is holding on to me. That's spiritually how I cope with it. That even if I cannot make head from tail, Jesus sees me. There's this line in I think it's The Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis, where Eustace asks Edmund, I think, do you know Aslan? And Edmund kind of says, oh, well, I don't know that I know him, but he knows me. And I have that quote written up on my wall because I have to just keep remembering. Sometimes I just can't work out who God is or what he's doing, because Tanzanians see him so differently from how I see him. But he knows me, and that's really what keeps me going.
Isn't it interesting? There is such a tendency in the human heart to make it all about us, and we do that with faith. We do that with grace. I mean, we take this message that is all about unconditional, sovereign God who loves us and pours himself out for us, and it's all about God. And actually, in our experience, we start to make it all about ourselves. And it's a remarkable capacity we have, isn't it? And it messes with your head, and it messes with your faith, and it makes you a dry, shriveled up Pharisee or a bitter, twisted, despairing disciple. Yeah.
I love how you put things, Mark.
Oh, well, it's extraordinary. And we've got to fight that in our heart. I mean, it's as true in my heart. It's true in all of our hearts. So, wow. I must confess that the years you spent with us in Melbourne were just wonderful. I look back on those with enormous fondness when you and Arthur were part of our church.
Oh, so do we. They were really formational for us. They were really great times.
Yeah. And it's wonderful to track along with people and see them growing and flourishing over the course of our lives. But the last few years, I mean, they haven't been easy. So tell us, and, a question I get a lot as a pastor is around suffering and hardship and death and so on. And I think Australians in particular, who will probably be the majority of people listening to this, up until coronavirus, our health system and our technology and our wealth and our painkillers insulated us and gave us the sense that we could be spared a lot of suffering and heartache. But in fact, we can't. It's an illusion that we can be spared it. So tell us a little bit about the journey you've been on with the particularities of grief and loss and trauma, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah. So as I said, I'm one of 4 girls, and that's twins, and then 2 sisters after that. I'm one of the twins. My twin's name is Steffi, and she died not long ago. Or feels like not long ago. It was 3.5 years ago now.
Yeah.
And that's what you're referring to. That's been
that is what I'm referring to gently.
Really
but tell us.
experience.
So she was the red twin. You were the blue twin. She was red. Was that right?
Yeah. So when we were small, because people had trouble telling us apart, we developed this system where she would wear red and pink clothes, and I would wear blue clothes. You can see I'm wearing blue too. I still keep that. Like she's no longer with us. We lived in completely separate countries, and she was still wearing red, and I was still wearing blue, because it just becomes part of your identity, right? Like when I wear red, I just look like Steph.
Yeah. So now she was quite a remarkable person, like you, taking her faith terribly seriously and serving God in quite difficult circumstances. Tell us a little bit about that, if you can.
Yeah, I can. So, she was so great. So Steph worked in a secure country in Central Asia as a psychologist, and she...
Sorry, just back up. That's jargon, some people. What does a secure country in Central Asia mean?
It means I'm not going to tell you what country it was. And the reason I'm not going to tell you country it was because it's a very difficult place where Christians are not often safe.
Great. Okay. So just for those who might not know the lingo. Yep. Okay. Yeah. So to protect the Christians are there and all the rest of it, you won't tell us exactly the country.
She worked there for an organisation as a psychologist. The place where she was, the first place that she went to in that country had a specialist burns unit, but no hospital. And the reason that they had a specialist burns unit was because the women there would self-immolate as a way of self-harming or attempting suicide because their lives were so terrible. Oh. And so they would, pour kerosene over themselves and light themselves on fire. So these women just had appalling lives and very, very little way of coping with them. So Steph came in to kind of set up a mental health centre there. And when she came in, she was training doctors and nurses, and the doctors, she came in and kind of had a look at what was going on. And what would happen is a woman would be brought in, normally by a male relative, who would say, my, sister or whoever has done this, and so she needs help. And she would come in, and the doctor or nurse would say to them, so, you've been hurting yourself or whatever. And she'd say, yes, I have been. And they'd say, stop it! And then just yell at her for half an hour. And Steph was like, okay, so let's work on some skills here, like taking a history. And she had, and so she taught them kind of how to ask people about their lives and take a history and this kind of thing. And then, so people started doing this. They came back to her in a complete panic. We took the history, the woman went away, now she's come back for a second session. We've never had someone come back for a second session before. We don't know what to do. And so... Right. Because of course it's never really been helpful before.
Yeah, that's right.
So this was kind of the level at which she was working and trying to just put in basic mental health practices for these women. So that was what she was doing, and of course Jesus is the great healer. So along the way, she's bearing testament to the one who really brings healing and wholeness.
Yeah.
The incredible thing about Steph, like you say, she's an amazing woman. She was. But she would tell you that actually she's she only went to Central Asia because she was disobedient. Because what happened was that, so we were always going to go, we were on our way to Tanzania, and she was going to be the great support person at home. And then what happened was God started kind of speaking to her in quite extraordinary ways and kind of prompting her that she wasn't going to be the person at home. She was going to be working overseas as well. And she was just like, nope, 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 not listening, not listening. And there were all these different prompts and whatever else. And then basically what happened was that God gave her a dream where he quite clearly called her. And she was just like, that sounds very spiritual. And she's like, no, you don't understand. I was being disobedient, so God had to get out his bombing knocker and hit me over the head with it to make me go.
Yeah.
And so then basically what she's like is, okay, fine, Jesus, but you understand that I know you want me to go, but I really enjoy routine and I really love being at home, and so I'll do a trial. And so she decides to go and do a trial for several months, basically to prove to Jesus that she couldn't hack it.
Yep.
Unfortunately, of course, the Holy Spirit is a great empowerer, and she came back and was like, yeah, okay, no, this is what I need to do, and wanted to do it then.
Wow.
But she really, and when she was going for that trial, she was, there is a child here with me. Sorry.
That's all right.
Do you want to come and sit on my lap? Because I'm just having a chat.
I remember to remind you for my science equipment.
Yeah, I'll come and help you with that in a minute. And what was I saying now? I completely lost the track.
The Holy Spirit's the great empowerer.
So she's about to get on the plane, and she's got tears running. So a week before, she calls me and she says, I can't do this. I can't do it. It's too scary. I can't do it. And I said to her, well, Steph, the problem is that you've had this dream and God's really spoken very clearly to you. So this kind of puts us in like Jonah territory. So I'd be going if I were you, because we all know what happened to Jonah. And she's just got, so she's getting on this plane. She's got tears running down her face because she doesn't want to go. And she's just putting one step in front of the other in obedience. She was extremely reluctant. But like I say, the Holy Spirit really empowered her. And then she was, she loved what she was doing and was absolutely devastated. So the way that she died, she was due to come back on home assignment. She had some like niggling health issues and just thought she'd come back and sort them out.
Yep.
Anyway, they diagnosed her with cancer. And actually at the time she was given kind of 3 different diagnoses. Like, here are your 3 different options.
Yep.
And she said to me, can you please pray that it's cancer? Because of the 3 different diagnoses, the other 2 would have stopped her from going back to Central Asia. But cancer, they were like, it's a minor cancer, we can just cut it out and, do a little bit of chemo maybe and we can send you back. And she was young, she was healthy, she was fit. And so she was like, pray that it's cancer. I'm like, this is such a weird thing to pray for, but okay. And because she just wanted to go back, that was where her life and her heart were. But then the cancer was just not what they expected at all. It was far more aggressive.
Yeah.
And she never made it back to Central Asia. So that was kind of what happened.
Yeah.
And so she came back for this home assignment. She'd just been with us in Dar, actually, a couple of months before, for her kind of out-of-country visit that she had to do. And so we'd seen her recently, and then on Christmas Eve we got the news it's cancer. And then by our birthday, which was Australia Day, they were saying, actually, this is really serious. And they said, Tamie, you have to come back to Australia as well because you have the same genes, and we need to check and see if you've got this cancer. And the test couldn't be done reliably here in Dar es Salaam, and maybe could have gone to Kenya, but the feeling was that it was just better to come back to Australia.
Yep.
So I came back to Australia largely to have those tests. I brought my Callum, who just met,
Yeah.
who was 1-year-old with me, and came back to have the test. And then while I was there having my tests, they basically said, she's got a month to live.
Gosh.
So at that point, Arthur and our oldest son, Elliot, came back as well because we were like, this is going to be hard. We have to be together.
Yeah.
CMS were fabulous. And so we were there, and then, but what happened was that there was this, my middle sister is a doctor, and she kind of got Steph into this experimental program where they, it's like immunotherapy, and they were testing it to see if it was going to work. And basically what happened was that they tried this immunotherapy over 5 months, and then they said it's worked. We reckon we bought her with about another 10 months to a year. And so we then went back to Tanzania because she was going to be okay for a bit. But then the following March she died, and so we were kind of, we knew it was coming. We had seen her kind of really pick up a lot and then really decline, and then and then my sister called us and said it's going to happen any time. So like in the next week, so it's time for you guys to come home. And our various supporters had set up a fund so that as soon as we needed to go, we could just jump on a plane, and that's what happened. And we went home. I say home. We went back to Australia.
Yeah, went to Adelaide.
And we arrived. My dad picks us up at the airport, and my brother-in-law. And I say, how's Steph? And he says, oh, she started doing her, there's a word for it. It's not Braxton Hicks. It's something like that. It's the type of breathing people do just before they die.
Yeah.
And they said she started doing that breathing. So we were like, Adelaide's a small place, so it takes 40 minutes to get to the like way northern suburbs where we live from the airport. So we get to the hospital, and she just opens her eyes and sings to me, and I'm like, hi, and she'd just been waiting for me, and then we get there, and basically I'm at her bedside saying goodbye to her, and then my mum and I and my middle sister all stayed the night at the hospital. And Steph wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning. She wakes up and she goes, God, why haven't I died yet? I was hanging on for Tam to get here. She's here. It's done. I'm ready to go.
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness. Wow.
But in the end, it took her another 6 days to die, in large part because she was like an absolute aerobics junkie, and her heart just took that long to get out, basically.
Yeah.
Like all the other organs had shut down and her heart's still ticking away. So we were there, and that was, really special to be able to do that. And so then we returned to Dar es Salaam, and then I was just like in a fog for a year. It was very difficult. I didn't have a job that I was doing. I was like on a dependent visa, so there wasn't stuff that I needed to be doing. But I had zero brain power. I just, I wasn't sleeping at night, but I was awake during the day, and I could not make my brain work, which is another loss of identity, because I'm a curious person. I love thinking about things. I love tossing things around, and I just, so it was, that was that year.
That's hard.
Yeah.
And it's hard because, Steph was doing God's work and full of life, and you'd go, there's a mystery in why that happens, right? Like, what the heck? Come on, God.
She had incredible stories of the people that she'd spoken to. And, in a place like that, which is, heavily Muslim and, very anti-Christian, it takes such a long time to build people's trust. And she'd been there 5 years. She was just getting there. just on the tip of it. You just think, God, I mean, this is just not good timing. I know
Yeah.
it's your world to rule how you want to, but I don't think you're doing a good job at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, that's like if I were running the world, that's not how I would have organized things. I mean, that's the truth of the
I mean,
matter,
who
right?
else is going to go to Central Asia?
Yeah.
And here's someone who took all this effort to get to go, who was really good at what she did. I mean,
Yeah, crazy.
yeah.
So I've spoken to many people along the years, over the years, for whom loss like that has actually caused them to question their faith and actually even give it up and say, look, it's all too hard. I just can't believe in a good, loving God when this kind of stuff happens. So have you had those thoughts? How have you processed them? How have you held on to Jesus in the middle of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, so, I guess theologically, the thing that I know is we live in a fallen world and these things happen, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of your starting place. That's fine, like academically, but when you're in a year of or more of fog, I felt like I just couldn't see Jesus. I felt like Jesus could have been standing right in front of me and I couldn't see him because the fog was so thick.
Wow.
And so then how do you hold on to something that you can't see? And I think this was where it became very precious to me that Jesus was holding on to me, because I didn't feel like I could see him, let alone hold on to him. The loss of a twin, the loss of any family, the loss of anyone that you love is massive. It has all these different dimensions when you're a twin.
Yeah.
Any loss has lots of dimensions, but yeah, it was extremely deep.
I can't begin to imagine what it would be like to lose a twin. I mean, I can't begin to imagine to have a twin, but then to actually lose someone.
I think that's the thing. Yeah, most people don't really understand what it is to be a twin. So, you know, we grew up our whole lives with people saying to us, "Oh, you need to be more of an individual," or, you know, it's weird that you're so close. And
wow, okay,
yeah, but at one point we actually stumbled onto a term that someone used called twin-dividual, which is that you know, you just can't. Twins are not individuals, but they're also not this one thing. Like you don't want to be treated as a pair or as but it's this kind of other thing. So yeah, you're grieving a whole stack of different things. So I think really I just kind of had to wait for it, wait for things to settle, wait for the fog to clear a little bit, then just kind of be patient. CMS hooked me up with a great grief counsellor who really helped me to see a lot of things that I had not seen before. I was very frightened of facing a lot of those feelings, because I just thought, this is so big. If I give attention to this, I'm going to get lost in it, and I'm just going to be in this forever. And, you know, you hear of people like, you know, say Queen Victoria, who, you know, was in mourning for the 30 years after her husband died and really never recovered and was always kind of depressed and didn't eat and stuff. And you just think, you know, that this is so deep, this is what it could be. But my counsellor was talking about how, like, grief is a pendulum, and you have to go between the kind of survival phase and the facing the grief kind of phase. And most people get stuck in one or the other. So, like Queen Victoria's stuck in the facing the grief kind of phase. But I was like well over on the survival side of things. So wasn't really giving attention to that. And she said to me, you know, you have to understand that emotions are tunnels, not caves. You don't go into them and get stuck. Yeah. You go through the darkness, and you do eventually come out the side. You have to let your body do the things that it's meant to do. You have to let it cry. You have to let it be sleepless. You have to let it do all these different things, and you will. But if you don't, you'll just, you know, that's how you get stuck. And I was just exhausted from holding back this, you know, tsunami of grief. And I said to her, I'm too tired to look at the grief. And she said, no, you're too tired to keep holding it back. And so I was doing that grief work with her, and it was, she's right. Psychologists are very clever people who know what they're on about. And it turns out, I didn't get stuck. It was very healthy to face up to those emotions. And then, but part of that was really asking these big questions of God and saying to God, why is this? And how do you not even just why did you let this happen, but how do you feel about me? Like, why would you do this to me? And a really big kind of breakthrough moment for me was another, on our second home assignment 2 years ago now, year and a half ago, it was Christmas time, and I went to a blue Christmas service at our church, which is the idea that Christmas is like, meant to be like happy and joyful, but for a lot of people missing family and friends, it's a very difficult time. And so they wanted to create space for that and create space for grief at Christmas. So I went along to this, and the thing about living cross-culturally is you don't necessarily grieve in the same way. So Tanzanians grieve completely differently from how we grieve. Yeah. And so people do these amazing visits where they come and they visit you at your house. And, we've been to these things where people have travelled 6 hours to be there, and then they turn around and go back. So people came to our house to give us gifts and, encourage us, but they encourage you by saying, just hold on to God and this won't happen to you. And you're like, so, it didn't kind of connect with me in the same way. And a lot of cross-cultural life is just allowing people to do things their way, even though it doesn't necessarily connect with you in your way and speak to your heart language. So it was really great to be back at our church in Adelaide doing this Blue Christmas and just having space to give to those emotions and to validate those when that was not something Tanzanians are great at. Anyway, so I was there, and the leader said, God, it was like a throwaway comment. She said, God is not waiting for you to get over this. And it really struck me. And she talked about how God is grieving with us and God is hurting with us. And I just thought, I thought that maybe God was like waiting for me to be able to see him again, or just waiting for me to work it out. And she was like, no, God's with you in this. He's not waiting for you. And that really kind of, for me, started a whole kind of way of thinking about how God was experiencing grief with me and with me in that. And so I'd had this kind of idea that Steph and I had talked about in Little Women, when Beth dies, she says to Jo that she thinks she'll be lonely for her even in heaven. And Steph and I we felt that so deeply. We used to talk about how it wasn't real. Nothing was real until I'd told Steph about it. This is part of the twin individual thing, that it could happen. Right. I could tell other people about it. It wasn't real until I told her about it. And so one of the losses for me was like, I can't tell her now, so nothing in my life is real anymore. And so I've really felt this sense of like, just storing up all these things, and I'm going to get to heaven and be like, so we need to sit down and have a massive debrief about however many years it's been. But I very much kind of thought of her there, and I felt really jealous of Jesus that he got to be with her. I mean, I should be jealous of her that she gets to be with Jesus, but it was the other way around for me, that Jesus got to be with her and I didn't get to be with her. And then but then there was this kind of imagination that I played out where one day I get to heaven and Jesus is there, and he brings me to the house, the room in his house of many rooms that he's made for me. And there's my name on the door, and next to it is another, and my name's in blue, and there's another door next to it, and it's in pink, and it says Steph's name. And he takes me to it, and I look at the door, and I think, there she is. But then I'm like, oh no, Jesus is here. That's more important. I should be on about Jesus. But Jesus has seen me look at the door, and he's like, no, go on. And I open the door, and she springs out, and she just throws her arms around me, and I throw my arms around her, and Jesus doesn't resent that, because he wants that just as much as what I do. And he's like, oh, that thing, it's been made whole now. And he rejoices in that as well. And I think kind of coming to that and thinking, this thing that I'm longing for is also a thing that Jesus is longing for, really kind of healed something in me that we were together in this kind of longing and loss, and that we would rejoice together in the healing and the wholeness.
That's just extraordinarily beautiful, and moving and profound. And the thought I had as you spoke was, I mean, the reason Jesus died was exactly to heal that's the whole point, like that's beautiful and painful, and wonderful all at the same time. And grief is, I say this all the time, I was so glad your counsellor said that to you as well. Grief is a tunnel, not a cave. Because I think many of us in our, I love that, like the terror of being stuck in the cave, right? Is real. And the other thing that I found helpful is in the cave, when it's very dark, the light is still with you, like Christ is with you in the tunnel, right? Like he's there. He's your light in the tunnel. But you got to go through it. You can't, you just have to go through it. That's the unbelievably awful thing about loss and grief is you just have to, got to deal with it, right? So. Wow. Well, thank you so much for the vulnerability and honesty there. That can't be easy to retell that story, and it wasn't easy for me to listen to it, but it was very hopeful and wonderful.
I mean, on one hand, it's not easy, and on the other hand, like, I just adore talking about Steph. And I love talking about her, and it's wonderful for my heart to be able to talk about her.
Well, and to know that she's actually not dead. I mean, she's dead, but she's also not. Like, that's the incredible thing about Christianity. Even though you die, yet you'll live.
I think that has been. There's a song in a Hillsong line. Now, what's the song? King of Kings, maybe, or something. And it's it talks about the King Jesus as the one who has resurrected me, and I found that really, really profound, to think that, like, that I am resurrected just as she is, because this is how we, like, that's something that we share, even though she's at a kind of, I don't know, a different stage of it or whatever. That's something that we share, that neither of us is dead, that we're both alive in Christ.
You just get to lug around this body of sin and death with you for a few more years until you get a new body. But I mean, life is precious. Like I'm like, I do want to see Steph again, and Jesus, obviously. I feel like at some point I've got to, like, put Jesus, as my number one thing that I want about about the new creation. But I also want to work here, and I love what I'm doing here, and I love my work here, and I don't want to cut it short. Like, it's terrible that Steph's work was cut short. I don't want to have mine cut short, so I do want to keep going. And I love life and love serving Jesus here in Tanzania. That is so obvious. It just shines through you, and that's that's what the Apostle Paul says, isn't it? He says we're sorrowful yet always rejoicing. Mm-hmm. That's actually the texture of the Christian life, and that's so true, eh? And life is good and wonderful, and Tanzanian theology that God wants us to expand, and that this is a place of blessing. That's also true, hey? I mean, there's a deep, deep truth in that we sometimes lose.
So much so. And I think it's very easy to think about, the majority world, and Africa in particular, as this kind of place where theology or Christianity is impoverished, just as the economy is impoverished, and that we need to come and help and, kind of beef that up. But my experience of being in Tanzania is that God is at work here, and that the theology is, while not my theology, doesn't really work for me, actually works super well for people here. But they are really committed to reading their Bibles and to working out how does this work for our context. And it is beautiful and sophisticated and amazing. And I'm really committed to kind of singing those praises, in part because I want to honour Tanzanians, but also because this is the Holy Spirit's work, and we've got to recognise it and rejoice in it and honour it and celebrate it. Because if we don't, we're actually missing an opportunity to praise God. And so that, it's an incredible privilege to be like a witness to it, and hopefully also to invite others to experience it.
Well, we're going to wrap this up, and maybe we can talk again in some form, which would be beautiful. I want to thank you so much for sharing this afternoon, and I hope it's been helpful for everyone who's listening. I hope it's really been helpful for you. You have a very significant voice, and it's a delight to hear it and to hopefully help others hear it and to hear the story of God at work in you and through you. And I look forward to many more conversations and seeing what God does with you and Arthur and Elliot and Callum and your tribe, where he takes you. And, thank you.